The quiet panic. You know that feeling when something's just off? When you walk into a space and your brain keeps telling you that something isn't quite right, but you can't put your finger on what it is. Well, what I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you think you know about the places you call home. This is something that's been eating away at me for months now. I've been collecting these stories, these experiences that people have shared with me, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I should even make this video. But after hearing the same impossible thing happen to dozens of different people, I knew I had to tell you about it. My name is Alex, and for the past 2 years, I've been documenting unexplained phenomena in residential spaces. What started as a casual interest in strange house layouts has turned into something much more disturbing. Because what I've discovered isn't just about weird architecture or poorly planned renovations. It's about rooms that shouldn't exist, spaces that defy logic, and places that seem to have their own agenda. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 of the most unsettling cases I've encountered. These aren't ghost stories or urban legends. These are real people, living in real houses, dealing with something that challenges our basic understanding of how space and reality work. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why I've started sleeping with my bedroom door locked every single night. But before we dive into these cases, I need you to understand something crucial. Every single person I interviewed for this project said the exact same thing when they first contacted me. They all started their message with those 6 words. There used to be another room here. Not I think there was a room, or maybe there was a space. They were certain, absolutely certain that a room had existed in their home that no longer did. The first case came to me through an email I received at 2 in the morning from a woman named Sarah in Portland, Oregon. She'd been living in the same house for 8 years, a modest 2-bedroom ranch-style home that she knew like the back of her hand. She could navigate every inch of that house in complete darkness, which is exactly what made what happened so terrifying. Sarah worked as a night shift nurse, so her sleep schedule was completely backwards from most people. She'd come home around 7 in the morning, exhausted, and head straight to bed. Her routine was always the same: park in the driveway, walk through the front door, past the living room, down the hallway that led to her bedroom and the bathroom. Simple layout, nothing complicated about it. But on this particular morning in late September, something was different. As Sarah walked down her hallway, muscle memory kicked in like it always did. She reached out her left hand to steady herself against the wall as she passed what had always been there, except her hand didn't hit the wall. It hit empty air, and she nearly fell sideways into what should have been solid drywall. Sarah flicked on the hallway light, and that's when she saw it. Or rather, that's when she saw what wasn't there anymore. Where there had always been a blank wall, there was now a doorway. Not just an opening, but a proper doorway with trim around it like it had been professionally installed. And beyond that doorway was a room she had never seen before in her life. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with the same hardwood flooring as the rest of her house. The walls were painted the exact same color as her hallway. There was even a light fixture on the ceiling that matched the ones throughout her home. Everything about this room looked like it belonged in her house, like it had always been part of the original construction. But Sarah knew with absolute certainty that this room had never existed before that morning. She stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, just staring into this impossible space. Part of her wanted to step inside and explore, but something deeper, some primal instinct, kept her feet planted firmly in the hallway. The room felt wrong, not in any way she could articulate, but in a way that made every nerve in her body scream danger. Sarah called in sick to work that night. She couldn't concentrate on anything except that room. She spent the entire day researching her house's history, pulling up the original blueprints from the city planning office, even calling the previous owners. According to every official record, according to every person who had ever lived in that house, there had never been a room in that location. The blueprints clearly showed a solid wall where the doorway now stood. The previous owners, an elderly couple who had lived there for 30 years before Sarah bought it, insisted they had never seen any room like the one she described. Even the home inspector's report from when Sarah purchased the house 8 years earlier made no mention of any additional spaces. But the room was there, undeniably, impossibly there. Sarah finally worked up the courage to step inside on the third day. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, she felt it. The temperature drop was subtle but unmistakable, maybe 5 or 6 degrees cooler than the hallway. The air felt thicker somehow, like breathing through cotton, and there was a smell, faint but persistent, like old paper and dust that had been sitting undisturbed for decades. The room was completely empty except for one thing. In the far corner, built into the wall, was a small closet. The door was slightly ajar, and Sarah could see that it was just as empty as the rest of the room. But something about that closet bothered her. The proportions seemed off, like it was deeper than it should be given the dimensions of the room. She approached the closet slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for the door handle. But before she could pull it open, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps coming from inside the closet, not the creaking of old wood or the settling of the house. Actual footsteps, like someone walking back and forth in a space that should have been far too small for a person to stand in. The steps were slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth with the rhythm of someone deep in thought. Sarah ran. She didn't walk. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted out of that room and didn't stop until she was standing in her front yard, gasping for air in the morning sunlight. When she finally gathered the courage to go back inside, hours later, the room was gone. Not just empty. Gone. The doorway had vanished, replaced by the same blank wall that had always been there. The hallway looked exactly as it had for the 8 years she'd lived in that house. If it weren't for the photos she'd taken with her phone, Sarah would have convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. But the photos were real. They showed the doorway, the room, even the partially open closet door. And in one of the photos, if you looked very carefully at the darkness beyond the closet door, you could make out what looked like the sole of a shoe. Sarah moved out 2 weeks later. She couldn't explain to her friends or family why she was suddenly selling a house she loved in a market where she'd never find anything comparable for the same price. How do you tell people that your house grew a room overnight and that something was living in the closet of a space that shouldn't exist? The second case reached me through a phone call I'll never forget. The voice on the other end was shaking so badly I could barely understand what the caller was saying. His name was Marcus, and he was calling from somewhere in rural Minnesota. He'd found my contact information through a forum dedicated to unexplained phenomena, and he was desperate to talk to someone who might believe his story. Marcus lived alone in a farmhouse that had been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather had built it in the 1940s. His father had renovated it in the 70s, and Marcus had inherited it 5 years ago when his parents passed away in a car accident. He knew every inch of that house, every creaky floorboard and loose doorknob. It was more than just his home, it was his connection to his family's history. The house had a simple layout, kitchen and living room on the first floor, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. Marcus used his childhood bedroom as his office, kept his parents' room exactly as they'd left it, and slept in what had once been the guest room. The third bedroom, the smallest one at the end of the hall, had always been used for storage. But according to Marcus, there used to be a 4th bedroom. He insisted that when he was growing up, there had been another room between his parents' bedroom and the storage room. A medium-sized bedroom with 2 windows facing the backyard, hardwood floors, and pale blue walls. He could describe every detail of that room with perfect clarity. The way the afternoon light would stream through the windows, the small water stain on the ceiling from when a pipe had leaked years ago, even the exact pattern of scratches on the hardwood where his father had moved furniture around. The problem was that room didn't exist anymore. And according to everyone else who had ever been in the house, it never had. Marcus called his aunt, his father's sister, who had visited the house countless times over the decades. She insisted there had only ever been 3 bedrooms upstairs. He contacted his childhood friends who had slept over during summer vacations. None of them remembered a 4th bedroom. He even dug up old family photos from holidays and birthdays, studying them frame by frame for any glimpse of this missing room. Every photo showed the same hallway he walked through now, with 3 doors instead of 4. But Marcus had memories. Vivid, detailed memories of playing in that room as a child, of helping his mother fold laundry on the bed by the windows, of his father using it as a temporary office when the downstairs got too noisy. These weren't vague recollections or childhood fantasies. They were concrete, specific memories with sounds and smells and textures that felt absolutely real. The breaking point came when Marcus decided to measure the hallway. He'd always been good with numbers, had worked construction for several years before taking over the family farm. He knew how to read blueprints and calculate square footage. So he grabbed his measuring tape and started documenting every inch of the upstairs layout. That's when he discovered the discrepancy. The exterior measurements of the house didn't match the interior dimensions. According to his calculations, there should have been an additional 12 feet of space between his parents' room and the storage room. 12 feet that simply weren't accounted for in the current layout. The hallway was the right length. The existing rooms were the right size, but somehow there were 12 feet of missing space. Marcus spent 3 days double-checking his measurements using every tool he could find. The numbers never changed. Somewhere in his house, there were 12 feet of space that existed on the outside but not on the inside. Space that he remembered as a bedroom with blue walls and 2 windows. He started having dreams about the room. Every night he would find himself standing in that familiar space, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that no longer existed. In the dreams, he could touch the walls, feel the texture of the paint under his fingertips, smell the faint scent of his mother's lavender laundry detergent that always lingered in the air. But here's where Marcus's story takes a turn that still gives me chills. 3 weeks after he started having these dreams, he woke up one morning to find a door. Not where the missing bedroom should have been, but in his basement. A door that opened onto a set of stairs leading up into darkness. Stairs that, according to his mental map of the house, should have led directly into the space where his memories insisted a bedroom had once existed. Marcus called me that first morning, his voice barely a whisper as he described standing at the bottom of those stairs, looking up into a blackness that seemed to swallow his flashlight beam. He could hear something up there. Not footsteps like Sarah had experienced, but something else. A sound like pages turning, like someone slowly flipping through a book. I told him not to go up those stairs. Every instinct I'd developed over 2 years of investigating these phenomena screamed that whatever was up there wasn't meant to be found. But Marcus was driven by something deeper than curiosity. This was his family's house, his inheritance, his connection to people he'd lost. He needed to know what had happened to that room. The last message I received from Marcus was a text sent at 3:47 in the morning. It was a single photo taken from the top of those basement stairs. The image showed a room with pale blue walls, hardwood floors, and 2 windows. But the windows didn't look out onto the farmland that surrounded his house. They looked out onto a vast empty space filled with what appeared to be other rooms, other houses, other impossible spaces floating in a darkness that stretched on forever. The text that accompanied the photo read, "I found it, but I think I found where all the missing rooms go. And I don't think I can get back." I tried calling Marcus immediately. The phone rang once, then went to a number that had been disconnected. I contacted the local sheriff's department, but when they went to check on him, they found the farmhouse empty. The basement door that Marcus had described was gone, replaced by a solid concrete wall that looked like it had been there since the house was built. Marcus had vanished along with any evidence that those stairs had ever existed. These cases have haunted me for months, but it's the third story that finally made me realize the true scope of what we're dealing with. This one didn't come through email or a panicked phone call. This one happened to me. Last month, I moved into a new apartment, a simple 1-bedroom place in a converted Victorian house. The layout was straightforward: living room, kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have triggered the kind of experiences I'd been documenting. But on my 3rd night there, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. In the darkness, I got out of bed and turned left down the hallway. just like I had the 2 previous nights. But instead of walking 3 steps to the bathroom door, I kept walking. The hallway stretched on for what felt like 20 or 30 feet, with doors on both sides that I knew hadn't been there before. I should have turned around. I should have flicked on the lights and returned to my bedroom. But after 2 years of collecting other people's stories, I finally had a chance to experience this phenomenon firsthand. I kept walking. The doors I passed were all slightly different. Some were painted white, others were natural wood. A few had glass panels, others were solid, but they were all closed, and something told me I didn't want to know what was behind them. At the end of the hallway, I found what I was looking for. A bathroom that was identical to mine, but somehow felt completely different. As I stood there in that impossible space, I realized something that changed everything I thought I knew about these experiences. The bathroom had a small window that should have looked out onto the alley behind my building. Instead, it looked out onto another hallway in another house, where a figure in pajamas was walking past doors that shouldn't exist. That figure was me. I was looking at myself from the outside, watching as I explored a hallway that had appeared in my apartment. And in that moment, I understood what was really happening. These rooms, these impossible spaces that appear and disappear, they're not random anomalies, they're connected. All of them. Every missing room, every unexplained doorway, every space that exists in our memories but not in reality, they're all part of something larger. A network of places that exist between the spaces we know, populated by the rooms that have been forgotten or lost or never quite fit into the world as we understand it. When I finally made it back to my actual hallway, back to my real bathroom, I looked out the window and saw only the alley I expected. But for just a moment, in the reflection of the glass, I saw that other hallway still there, still waiting. Sarah found a room that led to something that was already occupying the space. Marcus discovered stairs that led to where all the missing rooms end up, and I glimpsed the network that connects them all. The hidden architecture that exists in the spaces between our reality. The truth is, our houses are more than just collections of rooms and hallways. They're living things, constantly shifting and changing in ways we don't notice or remember. Rooms appear when we need them, disappear when we don't, and sometimes, just sometimes, we catch a glimpse of the spaces that exist in the margins of our everyday lives. If you've ever walked into a room and felt like something was different, if you've ever been certain there used to be a door where now there's only wall, if you've ever had that nagging feeling that your home is somehow bigger or smaller than it should be, then you've brushed against this hidden reality. And if you've ever heard yourself say those 6 words, "There used to be another room here," then you've already taken the first step into a world where space and memory and reality don't follow the rules we think they do. Just remember, some doors are meant to stay closed, some rooms are meant to remain lost, and some spaces between the walls of our world are better left unexplored. Because once you start looking for the rooms that shouldn't exist, they start looking back.